This is very Vaishnavas will be able to worship this sacred tree in this sacred location for many, many more years to come.
The next step, the next key component was the establishing of the Goshala. Krishna Balaram now needs to drink milk. Just like they did 5,000 years ago when they were herding Nanda Maharaj's 100,000 cows. So Prabhupada called me into his room and he says, I'd like you to establish a Goshala. Krishna Balaram need milk, and my disciples need to maintain health and vitality. Because in those days in Vrindavan, basically the milk that we were drinking was either watered down buffalo milk or very watered down, God knows what, milk. So that was important. So what do? Prabhupada has told me to start a Goshala. I didn't have any money. I didn't really know how to begin. So I had a Seiko watch on my wrist. And I thought, right, I'll sell my Seiko watch. And then Bhagaji, one older Indian gentleman that Prabhupada regarded as his right-hand man in India. And Bhagaji helped me incredibly over so many years in my service to Srila Prabhupada. So he took me to Govardhan market where there would be a monthly cow auction. And from the proceeds of selling my Seiko watch, I think we got about 800 or 900 rupees in those days for it, I was able to purchase 2 cows. And that's how the Goshala started. And the Goshala started simultaneously with the construction of the Gurukul, of the boys' Gurukul ashram, which also Prabhupada asked me to oversee the construction of that building.
After everyone had darshan, when the deities opened in the morning for Mangalarti, then they went to the sort of respective altar, like the women had Radha and Krishna, and the men had Krishna Balaram and Gonitar. And when Mangalarti having darshan, and at some point I turned around and then there was Prabhupada with 2 or 3 other devotees with him, one secretary or something. But all I know is that it was amazing to turn around and Prabhupada standing. You know how there are some steps. So he could not see very much, I suppose, being down from those steps and having the woman standing, turning our back to him, not knowing he was here, obviously. But I found out from Upendra afterwards that he was there for almost 10 minutes. Somebody was going to come to tell us to move. But when they tried to do that, Prabhupada said to just leave it. I mean, here's Prabhupada, probably not seeing very much, and he just stood there with all our back to him. And had I not turned around and seen him, no one would have moved away. It touched me.
invited to this convention of sadhus. So we all went. Of course, the whole thing was in Hindi. The first order of business, out of respect for Prabhupada, they voted Prabhupada to be the president of the convention. Of course, everyone had a chance to speak, but that also meant that the president would speak last. So Prabhupada had to sit. The Mona people, who don't speak, they use chalkboards to write, and the Jains with their mouths covered, and then all the Mayavadis and the yogis and Paramahansas, and everyone, they were talking, and Prabhupada, I don't know how he sat through all of this stuff. And then finally at the end, they asked Prabhupada to speak, and Prabhupada, he spoke in Hindi, but he was so animated, and he was quoting shlokas, and you could tell he was giving them the sauce. From the shlokas we could understand Bhagavatam kicks out cheating religion. They were all quiet, they couldn't say anything. Of course, in the end, then Prabhupada said, what is the use of these conventions? They talk about unity and peace, but they'll never achieve it. They all have their own idea. Unless they surrender to Krishna, how can there be any unity?
After he spoke, Prabhupada said, let's go. And right away he sat down and he said, so did you understand what I was saying? And we said, a little bit, Prabhupada. He said, yes. I told him, everyone's speaking so many things, he said, but not once did anyone mention Krishna as a speaker of Bhagavad Gita, as being the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He says that all your activities here will be useless. You won't accomplish anything. So he's still going on in the car. Prabhupada was a defender of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So he just told them all off. And then he got in the car and he left. And I remember on the way back, we headed back to Delhi, I guess, and there was a big typhoon. And it was pouring rain, and trees were blowing down in front of us and behind us. It was just like all hell broke loose, after Prabhupada left this assembly.
Towards the end of the darshan, the Delhi temple, he sat next to his harmonium and played a few melodies of the Hare Krishna mantra and chanted. And then he pushed the harmonium away and he said, this is the way to please Krishna, to chant the Hare Krishna mantra in different melodies. During Srimad Bhagavatam class, in that lecture he was talking about hogs, dogs, camels and asses, and my parents came to that particular lecture. And my father's response after that was, he said, what kind of lecture was that? He was just talking about hogs, dogs, camels, and asses. And Prabhupada gave us just what we needed to hear. But we're not always willing to accept. But it was very interesting. He was talking about Grihamedi life and hogs, dogs, camels, and asses. No Radhe Radhe or intimate pastimes, anything like that. When you look back now, it's so much clearer, how his preaching was medicinal on the level that we needed to hear these things, and we still need to hear these things. He's giving the right medicine, the right dose at the right time. Not like a quack who give you something that you like to take, but doesn't actually do the job.
You're all the devotees. But you can see Prabhupada, after arriving 10 hours on the plane, 12 hours, sometimes 15-hour flight, he's always fresh and spry. Navayovana, Krishna's Navayovana. So Prabhupada was the servant of the ever-fresh Krishna, so he was always spry himself too. And Prabhupada's weighted down with the flowers. There's never too many flowers. Prabhupada would distribute the flowers. There he is, a material calculation, an old man walking with the young, spry, enthusiastic devotees. This was a great scene. Prabhupada felt comfortable in the presence of all the young, enthusiastic devotees. He didn't feel out of place. Srila Prabhupada would only come to Australia once a year, which was quite good considering the remoteness of the country. But Prabhupada came to Australia 6 different times. This is a good picture. On the right is the temple, and on the left is the Prabhupada house. Beautiful yellow and white. We painted the whole house. Up on the top it said Prabhupada house. There's a widow's walk on the top where they could look out into the ocean. There's Prabhupada walking in. This old house was about 100 years old, a Victorian house, a historical house. It was the first house in the whole neighborhood that was built by this rich man. All the details about it you can get from Korma's book, The Great Transcendental Adventure, by Korma Das, the cook. The whole house was redone, and we made it very elaborate, ebony wood, and the drapes and the walls, and the floors were all done over, and the chandelier, and Prabhupada walked in, he looked around, he says, all this is for me? And we said, yes, Prabhupada, this is Prabhupada's house, your house. So we were very happy. But before this time, we had always been operating out of small houses and storefronts, and the devotees collecting in the streets and enduring a lot of different hardships, distributing Srila Prabhupada's books. So moving into this new temple and inviting people was the crowning glory of all their efforts. And it was a time of great pride for the devotees to showcase their spiritual master in such a beautiful setting and such a relaxed atmosphere. And this marked a great historic time in Australia Yatra.
When Prabhupada came back and they took him up to his room, and so I went up there and brought this beautiful silver bowl with these peanuts and spiced rice bubbles in it. And I came in and put it down before Prabhupada and paid my obeisances. And then Prabhupada took out his Gayatri thread and started chanting his Gayatri. So all the other big Brahmins in the room brought out that Gayatri thread and sat there like this. And then after a very short time, Prabhupada finished chanting his Gayatri. Everyone else still had their, sacred thread hooked around their thumbs. So Prabhupada reached into this bowl of these spiced rice bubbles, picked up a little bit and handed to the nearest Brahmin who still had his thumb hooked around his Gayatri thread. And what a dilemma. So all the devotees immediately stopped chanting their Gayatri, put their hands out and accepted what Prabhupada was offering them. I've later found out from Shruta Kirti's book, this was a fairly common occurrence, that Prabhupada chanted his Gayatri very quickly. So one by one the devotees got up and left the room, and I was still sitting there alone with Prabhupada. And he asked me what my service is. I said, Prabhupada, I do cooking and deity worship. He said, oh, that is very nice.
This is one of the things I think the devotees really appreciate, and I talk about it a lot, is, it's seeing how, or hearing how Prabhupada lived. That, we all need to see and know how Prabhupada practiced Krishna consciousness. And taking prasadam was, to me, was just such a wonderful activity, the way he did it. You can see he always took prasadam alone, 99% of the time. And if there was someone who was in the room and I would bring him prasadam, he would just very graciously, he would take off a piece of fruit or 2 or 3 for whoever was there, or a little sweet, and just give them a little something and say, okay, Hare Krishna, and send them on their way. And then he would sit there and he would just honor prasadam. He did it very calmly and peacefully, and never in a rushed way, never talking about different things, but he relished prasadam. It was such a nice thing to see. There's another thing we do, especially as Westerners, we can turn taking prasadam into meeting times and just socializing times with other devotees, just carelessly, talking about whatever, and really not get into the significance of honoring prasadam, mercy from Krishna. You could see with Prabhupada, he took it in that way. You could just feel, he was honoring Krishna in the form of his prasadam. So wherever he was, prasadam he was ready to have right around noontime. And as he traveled and the time changes, he would just immediately adapt. There was no adjustment periods for Prabhupada. Never talked about jet lag, having to recover, take a day off. Just went right in and immediately accepted his responsibilities that he had, given himself, giving class, greeting the deities, morning walk, meeting with the devotees, the management, giving advice.
The first time I met Srila Prabhupada, I met him in Burnett Street. Upendra asked me up to go and see him, and I sat down after offering my obeisances, and Srila Prabhupada looked straight at me and said, "So you've had doubts?" And I hadn't said a word, so it was obvious straight away that I was in the presence of someone quite extraordinary, because I did have doubts and I hadn't expressed them. And I said, "Yes, Srila Prabhupada, I really like to chant, but I have a lot of trouble with the Hindu mythology, with people with 4 heads flying around on swans," was exactly what I said. And he sat back and put his hand back behind his head, played with his seeker, and sort of looked up. And then he looked back at me and he said, "So don't worry about that, just chant, and everything will be fine." So that was the first instruction he ever gave me. I took that very seriously, and I started chanting like 32 rounds a day. I took it on board as best I could. And then from that point, the next time I saw him was in Sydney. Someone had told him I was an artist. And he said, "So you're an artist?" And I said, "Yes, Srila Prabhupada, I'm a painter." And he said, "Could you design a temple?" I was young, so I said yes. So he got me to come around his desk and sit right next to him. And so I sat down next to him, and everyone was askance, they were sort of all quite taken back. And so was I was trembling. I remember everything was trembling. And he took out all these small black and white photographs of Vrindavan, and particularly the temple where he lived, the Radha Damodar temple, and showed me the photographs. And he asked me to design a temple for Vrindavan. And he gave me this whole, there must have been 50 photographs. So what happened is I went away and designed a temple, but I didn't stick to the Radha Damodar format that he gave me, and I designed something far too modern. And in the end I produced a huge architectural model and everything, with none of which I'd ever done before. So it was really quite wonderful, because I was only 22. But he was very kind through the whole process and very supportive. And he did mention that when you do something with the mood of service, it's not necessary that it be carried out for the service to reach fruition, because the actual engagement in that mood was the thing that mattered. So he was very encouraging. The only reason I wanted to share all that is that I had a lot to do with the design of Burnett Street, and I had a bit to do with this as well, the current Melbourne temple. During that time there was a lot of petty divisions within the movement, and people were very concerned about whether you lived in or out of the temple and all of that sort of thing. And it was all very understandable, because people were very young, trying to find their feet in something that was way beyond their understanding. At that stage I had reasonably long hair, and I'll never forget this, because I did a painting which is now in Srila Prabhupada's room in the Melbourne temple here. And the painting is of Radha and Krishna with a peacock behind them. And I brought the painting in to give to Srila Prabhupada. It's 4 feet square and quite a heavy thing. And all the devotees were there, and Srila Prabhupada came out into the hallway, and he saw the painting, and he said, "Oh, what is this?" And I said, "Oh, it's a painting I've done for you, Srila Prabhupada." And he smiled, and then he looked at my hair, and he said, "So what is this?" And I started to say something about trying to look like everyone else and not scaring people, and I got about halfway through and realised it was nonsense, and so I just sort of laughed. And he reached out and rubbed my hair and laughed. And it was really sweet. It was the exact opposite of what I expected. He was very gentle with me, because I wasn't very strong spiritually or devotionally, so he was particularly soft with me. He just laughed and rubbed my hair, and it was one of the sweetest memories I have of Srila Prabhupada. And then he looked back at the painting and he said, "Bring it into my room." So I carried it in, and he said, "Put this painting right next to my bed. I want it to be the first thing I see in the morning and the last thing I see before I go to sleep at night." And that was it for me, you know, that was the perfection of anything I wanted to aspire towards. And so I did. I put it there and I propped it on the table, and then he gave me some instruction, unfortunately most of which I can't remember. A lot of what Srila Prabhupada said was in Sanskrit, and that's why I don't remember. But the part I do remember at the end, he said, "I can write, you cannot write. You can paint, I cannot paint. Let's work together in Krishna service." And so I took that very seriously and did what I could to help Madhavisa with the temple here in Melbourne.
Darshans were pretty amazing. When Prabhupada would greet the deities, he'd be, of course, the centre of attention. But it all just went past him. He was totally unaffected. And he went in front of the deities as their most humble servant. And that, for me, reinforced his personal qualities. He'd be in ecstasy, and his eyes would be on Radha Ballabha, and you could see that tinge of the ointment of love. He'd be totally in love with the deities.
Srila Prabhupada's lectures at the Melbourne Temple were actually held in the evening. Normally Prabhupada's Bhagavatam classes were held in the mornings, but on the advice of Madhavisa Swami, with whom he always took counsel, he had a lot of respect for Madhavisa Swami, and Madhavisa had suggested that we'd get more guests along to the temple in the evening time. So Prabhupada, with a slight movement of his head and a smile, he agreed to Madhavisa that yes, definitely we'll do that. So Prabhupada would take his morning walks at the Botanic Gardens, as he always loved to do. It was one of his favourite places to walk, he said. And then he'd come back to the temple. There would be greeting of the deities, and then Guru Puja, and then he'd return to his room, and we'd have the Bhagavatam class in the evening.
During Srila Prabhupada's lecture, one devotee asked a question, and his question was that if a devotee is initiated as a Brahmin and he leaves Krishna consciousness, then isn't it appropriate that if he wants to come back, that he should be reduced to the level of a Sudra? It was a very theoretical kind of a question. And Srila Prabhupada cut him off quite quickly and said, "It is not for you to judge who is guilty and who is innocent." And then he tried again, and he rephrased, or he re-presented his question. It may have been that he didn't think that Srila Prabhupada understood his question, but he tried again to explain this point that somebody who leaves should be put in a lower position and then work their way back up. And Srila Prabhupada again cut him off. And then he commented afterwards that only the spiritual master knows who is actually guilty and who is innocent. And that really struck me quite deeply, that Srila Prabhupada was indicating that we can't see from the outside what are people's intentions and motives, so as to be able to judge them or degrade them, for their offences or their faults.
Each evening, Srila Prabhupada would give a lecture, and a couple of the lectures he spoke on how society should be organised according to the Varnashram Dharma, and how it was the duty of the leaders of society to rule properly. So I was very impressed by these sort of lectures, because previously I'd been to university and I'd studied economics and politics, and I was interested in how society should be organised. Previously in 1974, after coming back from the Mayapur festival, some devotees in America, Balavanta Prabhu in particular, were running for Congress. So in elections in Australia, I was put up to be the representative of the In God We Trust Party, the political party of the Hare Krishna movement. And from this, we got so much wonderful publicity, interviewed on so many of the leading current affair TV programs, on the Mike Willesee show, in Melbourne Tonight. And when I was on the Mike Willesee show, he asked me what our policy was. And I was explaining to him how we weren't so much interested in so many political ideologies, but actually we were more interested in the quality of the politician, of the morality of the politician. The politician should have good spiritual qualities, because in the past so many politicians were so corrupt and involved in so many different types of scandals and corruption, so they were of no good quality. One of our platforms was that if we got elected, we would close down the two bars in Parliament House, where the politicians would go and they would drink so much alcohol, and then after deciding to have the vote, they would ring the bell, so that all the politicians were forced to leave the bar and to leave their drinks and to go back into the house and make the vote. So we made a big point that so much legislation was passed in the Parliament by intoxicated leaders. So we thought that this was actually quite disgusting. Our political platform was actually based on Harinam. We would go out and we would chant on the streets of Melbourne, and we would stop in a particular place and perform the kirtan, and of course hundreds of people would come around. Then we would stop the kirtan and I would stand on a soapbox and get up and talk about the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. And we would talk for 3 or 4 minutes and everyone would listen, and I would finish and they would all clap in appreciation. Then we would continue chanting on down the street and stop at the next corner and get up and give another talk. So actually we went around the suburban streets where there were just houses, and we would have kirtan up and down the suburban streets. So in this way, not only were we participating in a political process, but it was all based on Harinam of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So in that way, we were spreading Krishna consciousness. So as we engaged in the electoral campaign, we got quite a lot of publicity. And one evening we were on a show called Melbourne Tonight, which was a big variety show in Melbourne. And one man came to Australia, and his name was Arnold Schwarzenegger. And he had just won the title of Mr. Universe for the 2nd or 3rd time. And he was doing a tour of Australia, so he was a very smart guy. And he saw me on this political show, so he wanted to get publicity for himself. So the next day he rang up and he suggested that we have a meeting together, and he could bring along a cameraman, and we would have publicity for him and publicity for the Hare Krishna political campaign. So we agreed to it. So the next day Arnold Schwarzenegger came and we met with him, and we had a big discussion, and we were explaining to him that we're not this body with the soul, but he was flexing his muscles and telling us how good and how big and how powerful he was, and he was fit and healthy, and we weren't fit and healthy because we were in doing meditation, but we challenged him to come out on an 8-hour kirtan with us and see if he could keep up. You have to be very fit, but anyhow he declined. And then finally he brought a photographer along and he took a photograph of myself and him shaking hands, and the next day it appeared in the paper, and it had "The man of the body meets the man of the spirit," and a very, very nice favourable article underneath that caption.
Prabhupada was giving class in one evening, and I think it was the first evening that Prabhupada was there, and we'd all been working really hard and hardly slept at all for like a few days, preparing everything. And so as Prabhupada started the class, I think more than half the devotees nodded off. And then Prabhupada told everyone to wake up. And I was one of them. I ended up going to sleep. I hadn't slept properly for at least 3 days. So I tried even standing up, but I almost fell over. Anyway, Prabhupada for 2 or 3 times told everyone to wake up. And then after that, Prabhupada actually got quite heavy. And he started explaining that the disciples' responsibility and duty is to hear from his guru, and that it's very disrespectful for a disciple to go to sleep in front of his guru while guru is giving Harikatha. Prabhupada was very, very strong in that. So that was good for me because it helped me understand the relationship between disciple and guru. Because at that time, we were doing so many things, but Prabhupada pointed out that the most important thing was to hear from the Guru. So I always remember that.
When Prabhupada was on the Vyasasana, I took it upon myself to take his water in his lota when he's finished. That was my task. I took it to the kitchen and took that water and distributed it. And I was a bit greedy. I had most of it. Prabhupada was, he was the real centre for the movement in Australia. When he was here, everybody was there, and it was just so exciting. Everybody drove from everywhere to be there. And it was all around Srila Prabhupada. And even the people on the edge who were just interested visitors would get caught up in that enthusiasm. And I'm sure many of them joined as a result.
Sarvapadhi vinirmuktam tatparatena nirmalam rishikena rishikesa sevanam bhakti ruchyate. This bhakti means that we have to clear ourselves from the designation. What is that designation? Everyone is thinking, I am American, I am Indian, I am European, I am Australian, I am cat, I am dog, I am this, I am that, body. We have to cleanse this bodily conception of life, that I am not this body. Aham Brahmasmi, I am spirit soul. This you have to realize. Then there will be no distinction. And here is an American, here is an Australian, here is an Hindu, here is a Muslim, here is a tree, here. No. Pandita Samadarshina. Pandita means learned, one who knows things as they are. For them, Vidya Vinaya Sampanne Brahmane Gavi Hastini Suniche cha Sapake cha Pandita Samadarshina. A person very learned, Vidya, and very gentle. Vidya means, educated means he is gentle, sober. He is not rogues and ruffian. That is Vidya. That is the taste of education. He must be very educated, sober and silent. That is called gentleman in one word. Abhuta prasannatma na sochati na kankati samas sarveshu bhuteshu madbhakti ravati para. Samas sarveshu bhuteshu. Unless one is spiritually realized, he cannot see equally everyone. Then samas sarveshu madbhakti ravati para. Then one can become real devotee of the Lord. After surpassing the Brahma-bhuta stage. So this bhakti line is not so easy. But by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mercy, we have installed the deity here in your country. You are very fortunate that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has come to your country to teach you how you become free of all anxiety. This is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission. Everyone is full of anxiety, but everyone can be free from all anxieties if he follows the path chalked out by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And what is Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's instruction? Very simple. Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Hare Nama iva kevalam kalau nasti, 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 gatina. This is not Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's personal version. This is in the scripture, Vedic scripture. Beyond Naradiya Purana, this instruction is there. As people are following in this age, the method also has been offered very simply. They cannot follow any strong or severe austerities. It is not possible. They have been recommended simply to chant the holy name of God. That's all. Anyone can do. It is not difficult at all. Then if you say that you are from India, your Chaitanya is Indian, and he is recommending Hare Krishna, why shall I chant? I have got my own God. All right. If you have got your own God, then you chant his name. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu doesn't say that you chant simply Krishna's name. If you have got any relationship with God, and if you know his name and address, then you chant his name. Unfortunately, you do not know who is God. Neither you know his address, neither his activities. So take this Krishna. Here is a solid name. And he give you his address, his father's name, his mother's name, everything. Krishna, his form, his activities, his qualities, we cannot understand with these blood material senses. It is not possible. Athasya Krishna namadi na bhave grahyam indriya. Then we have got this only possession in this, how itself. Understand? Sevanmukhi jivhadu. If you engage your senses in the service of the Lord, sameva spuratada, then Krishna will reveal to you the error. This is the first. Now, this word is very significant. Sevanmukhi jivhadu. Jivha means tongue. If you simply engage your tongue in the service of the Lord, you will graduate. How to engage the tongue? It is not said that if you see or if you touch, if you smell, no. If you taste. So what is the business of the tongue? The business of the tongue that we can taste nice food stuff and we can vibrate. Do these two jobs. Vibrate with your tongue Hare Krishna and take as much as possible prasad. And you become a devotee. Thank you very much.
Funny that pastime with that devotee with the long hair and the Radha Krishna painting. I just read that pastime this morning.
I read it like yesterday or something.
Yeah, it was on Facebook. Some friend put it on Facebook.
Oh wow.
The exact same pastime. I just read it this morning.